Hello, we're here with Jason Williams, who is running for Seattle City Council District 7. Would you like to go ahead with your 2-minute introduction?
Yes, please. Thank you again for taking the time. I do appreciate there's a lot of other things that you do with your time, and being committed to this extent is something that benefits our community and something that I'm incredibly grateful for as a candidate, so appreciate it. Look, so I wanted to share a little bit about who I am and what I stand for. So when you make your decision, then you can know what kind of candidate I'll be or what kind of council member I'll be as I represent District 7 for the City of Seattle. So I grew up in Federal Way. Both of my parents were working folks. My dad was a butcher, my mom a grocery checker. She worked nights. When I was 6, she became a paraeducator and enrolled at Highline Community College to start a night class to pursue a lifelong dream to become an educator. That night class lasted 8 years, but she did it. She finally graduated the same weekend my sister graduated from high school. And so for me, you know, I grew up in a household where I saw the women in my life model the importance of education and of economic mobility. And I've been fortunate that my sister paved the way that the natural step is after high school is that you go to college. I'm fortunate now. I went to Seattle Pacific, you know, graduated 10 years ago. So I've been in the district for 14 years. I went after some odd jobs, management consulting, went to graduate school back east. Now I work at Microsoft. So I've been able to participate in some of the wealth and creation as Seattle has grown, but I'm concerned that we are leaving our kids behind. What I want to ensure is that we ensure our children are the source of best talent for our future jobs, regardless of race, regardless of background, whatever zip code they're born into. What's more is, as we grow and become more dense as a city, I want to ensure that we preserve those keystone lands, waterways, and heritage sites that make Seattle special, while at the same time giving a voice to everyone to shape our emergent culture, neighborhoods, and communities in our town. We can only make this vision possible if we restore trust and accountability to local government, and that means being better listeners. That also means better accountability for results. And as someone who has business experience, I intend on being that person. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. And now we are on question number 1. And I don't remember. Was that the type to start there?
Sure, pick on me.
Sorry.
I would be happy to, because yes, I do have that particular question.
Oh, you can flip that over.
Thanks.
Okay, we can read it together. If elected, what policies would you support to address the need for affordable housing and homelessness services?
This question is so important. Thank you for raising it. We must act, and we must act now. We now have just as many homeless as we do high schoolers in our city, and it is an emergency each and every single day for the folks who are living in the street. I was incredulous by the fact that when we had Snowmageddon back in February, magically we found hundreds of more units for housing for our homeless who are living on the streets. And yet when the snow stopped, but the weather was the same temperature, those beds were no longer available. And I think it is an emergency each and every day for these folks who are living on the streets, so we must solve the problem. Related to that problem is housing affordability, of course. As homelessness is first and foremost a problem around economic insecurity. And so one of the things that I want to do is to start first with increasing the financial resiliency of at-risk households. What does that look like? It starts first with getting folks into a path for a living wage job. That means starting early with strengthening education. It also means making improvements to our workforce development system. What's more is, I like what the city of Tacoma has done with doubling down from their anti-homelessness strategy on diversion, meeting with folks and helping them address financial needs, and where needed, writing a check to help folks manage through an emergency, whether it's a health crisis or not making rent, you know, because they couldn't make it to work or those sorts of things. So that's one, is strengthening the financial resiliency so people don't end up on the street in the first place. The second thing is we absolutely need to build more housing. That is a key element and key lever here, right? Housing. And so we need to upzone, starting first with those dense areas and then around transit corridors. We also need to have a greater percentage of that housing be inclusionary, so fixed at different income levels, like 30% AMI, 60%, 80%, and so forth. And we should do it, we should also look at other solutions as well, such as ADUs and DADUs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Seattle has the most progressive tax code in a state with the most progressive tax code in the country. Given the repeal of the head tax and the ongoing litigation of the city income tax, how would you raise more progressive revenue to help fund city services?
Thank you for this question. Yeah, it is true that that a tax system, local tax system, as well as state tax system, disproportionately impacts working people, right? And predominantly people of color, and that's a problem. It's already hard enough, as we see some of the statistics, that when you look at education outcomes, income and wealth disparities, adverse impacts from climate change, is that the biggest disparity is along race. And so we have to take an equity lens for how we solve this. And what I believe, one of the things that I would like to explore in terms of adding more revenue is, first, we should only add more revenue if we are acting as good stewards of public resources. And the last approval rating I saw of City Council is 26%. And it suggests, as well as the reaction to the head tax, it suggests that a lot of folks feel like our city is not a good steward right now of our resources. So we need to restore trust. What's more, though, is when we think about progressive, adding more revenue, it is likely the case to solve the acute crisis of the day that we do need more funds. We need to restore trust and accountability first. Secondly, how do we restore funds? When I was living in San Francisco, my wife was considered working poor. In the city of San Francisco, on a health bill, or on a restaurant bill rather, you would pay a fee. And that fee would go into a publicly funded health fund for the working poor, like my wife, right? So by the time we left San Francisco to go back east for grad school, she had thousands of dollars in what was basically like a publicly funded HSA. And I would like to explore options like that. For the people who can afford going to a restaurant, paying $40, $50 for a restaurant bill, those are the people who have the means to fund services like healthcare services, like universal, access to affordable, high-quality early learning that I would like to do. I would also like to look at maybe exploring fees on hospitality for business travelers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Clayton.
Given the city's reset of the Move Seattle levy, the upcoming expiration of the city's bus funding tax, and the planning for light rail through much of our district, what will be your priorities in deciding how the city spends its transportation funds?
Thank you for that. Yeah. One of the things that I've learned recently is the King County, which has authority over a lot of our municipal or our regional transit system, because of a voter initiative, is limited to increasing their revenue to only 1% per year, right? And so this is a critical problem when we think about how we're going to meet the funding needs for our regional transit system. And so that's why things like the Move Seattle levy is so important, that we step up as a community and as a region, that we say it's important not only from an equity standpoint and also reducing congestion, but also from a sustainability standpoint. We have to have more transit, more mass transit. One of the things that I would like to do is to increase, the frequency and reliability in working with King County to improve access of transportation access deep into our neighborhoods. A lot of my neighbors in Magnolia, they will say that they'd love to take more buses into the city, but complain that they wait on Viewmont for 20, 25 minutes before a bus comes, and the bus may never come. And so we have to recognize that, yes, we absolutely have to build dedicated bike lanes, because we need to ensure that our pedestrians and our bikers have safe routes to get in and through downtown. We have to do that. We also have to, I am a fan of the streetcar, connecting the two streetcars, because I think that it'll provide a network that will have, create synergy in the city for helping people get around. But I think absolutely our first and primary responsibility should be increasing mass transit, the frequency and reliability of our bus system. What's more too is this was related to housing, right? If we made it easier for working people to live where they work, so everyone could live, work, and play in the same community, then that would also be improvement to our congestion and help reduce congestion. And also would be better for standard of living for the people who are living and working in the city.
Right, thank you. Jason?
How will you continue the process of reforming the police department beyond the expiration of the consent decree?
It's a great question, and also a timely question too, given the report that came out today, right? And look, it's clear that that our police department has had a fraught relationship, especially with people of color in this community. And that's a problem, because when the last thing that we need when we think about public health and safety is for anyone in our community to hesitate before calling a first responder. God forbid there be a domestic abuse situation or a violent crime or what have you. And so we need to ensure that our public has confidence in their ability to call, local police services. And so that's why the consent decree was so important. I like some changes that have been made to have, to have councils to look after the progress that has been made with the consent decree. I would like to continue to give local folks, especially people of color, a leading voice in shaping policies and rules and programs that help build that trust and that connective tissue between our police force and our community, and to make sure that we do step up community policing, but in a way that is that it creates value to the community rather than creates conflict within that community. So that's what I would like to do. The second thing is, I think that we could establish a permanent, committee or task force to continue after the expiration of the consent decree, to continue to look for proactively, to continue to look for ways in which we can forge a better relationship between our police force and people in our community. Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Great, thank you. And now we'll open it up. So Matthew and then Alice.
Thanks.
So I want to ask a short question, and then I'm going to follow up with a longer one.
The responses for these are 1 minute.
Okay. And are you asking a few questions?
Yeah.
Right. So I'll ask you it, and then we'll stop the timer. And then. So the short one is.
He's drunk with power.
At the
I'm noticing that.
based on the last one night's count, what percentage of our homeless population had been in King County before they become homeless?
You're asking me just a factual question.
Yes.
I don't know the exact percentage.
Okay, cool. So it's 75 to 80%. So my question then is, your platform is about how our children are the workforce. Now, since 75 to 80% of our homeless population is from here, what do you think the leading cause of that? Lived here before they become homeless. What do you think the leading cause of that is, and what do you plan to reverse those trends? 66%. I'm sorry. 67%.
It takes a village. I'm glad that we're holding each other accountable.
Maybe the village idiot.
Yeah. So your question is, look,
what
homelessness is disproportionately impacting local people.
Right.
And so what can we do to help those local people?
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. And this is why, I'm increasingly concerned with the public discourse around homelessness right now, which has been shaped, by recent media. And the data does suggest that homelessness is still first and foremost a problem around economic insecurity. What does that mean? I talked about it earlier, that it means first and foremost we need to get people into stable and enduring living wage jobs. We now have a bifurcation in our workforce where we have a professional class and we have a service class. And that service class, by the way, I've now met a barista who commutes all the way from Lakewood, south of Tacoma, and that is not okay, because we benefit when people of all classes and backgrounds can live here. So that's one thing, is strengthening the financial resiliency of at-risk households. The second thing is that, look, we need to make sure that we're meeting people where they're at in terms of using things like diversion to help increase their financial resiliency, and also layering on top of that, viewing it as a platform on which we can address other contributing factors such as mental health.
Thank you. Yes.
What are your thoughts on, you kind of mentioned this in one of your answers, but on single family zoning and maybe thinking about the way we approach that going forward?
I mean, single family zoning still in our city today, 75% of our land, keep me honest, is zoned for single family use, right? And when we think about 1,000 people moving here every single week, and we think about the city that's many people, people who have grown here or grown up here, aspire for our city is an urban metropolitan city where we continue to grow and develop economically. And so we have to think about rezoning some of our neighborhoods. Look, I believe it starts first with rezoning around those transit corridors where we provide equitable access for working people to services, right? I do believe that around our urban villages, like Jason and I, both live in Magnolia, the Magnolia Chamber of Commerce, they'd love to see hundreds of more units in that Magnolia village. And what we should do is look around the village and think about rezoning maybe around the village, around these urban village cores to ensure that we're adding more units. It's clear that the priority here is that we should add more units, and more of those units should be inclusionary from an income perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. And then Elizabeth and Clayton.
We can use it.
It's my turn.
sorry.
Other than that, you mentioned units in Magnolia Village, and I'm wondering if you could tell me your position on the Fort Lawton project in Magnolia and how you see that evolving.
Yeah, Fort Lawton project is a good project to ensure that we have diversity in our neighborhood. Look, I'm in a PEPS group. Is everyone familiar with PEPS? Young Parents Group. 6 couples, 6 babies, all babies born within 5 weeks of one another. Every single working parent, myself included, works in tech. And they all look like me. And it's so boring. It's so boring. I want for my daughter to grow up in a neighborhood where she has friends whose parents were like my parents. Butchers, public school teachers, but also nurses, firefighters, artists. Because I believe every single neighborhood is stronger with diversity in class and backgrounds. And even I'll talk to some of my wealthiest neighbors who live on Magnolia Boulevard, Jason, the neighborhood I'm talking about. And they will say the same thing, that this is something that they value. And so I think Fort Lawton is a great step in that regard. I do have concerns that I want to make sure that we make sure that the people who will call that place home are well served with transit, and that's why I believe we need to add more frequency, and reliability and transit service to that area, as well as I would say to all of our neighborhoods, right? Magnolia, but also Queen Anne and other places. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Clayton.
We have a problem of managing contradictions, it seems. The earth does not need.
Philosopher, yeah.
The earth
just getting started.
Let's talk about the earth.
Okay. All right.
Say 5.
Yeah.
Ridicule. You get old and you just become increasingly absurd, and my job tonight is to prove that. I want to return to Fort Lawton and also Jefferson Park. There is talk of converting the Jefferson Park golf course into the most magnificent condos the city has seen yet. Likewise with Fort Lawton. I'm rather cynical about this because I think the earth needs more trees. Not more condos on golf courses. But anyway, just
Reactions to that.
a reaction to my mumbling.
That's good. It's out of luck. Thank you. No, okay. I share your concern. One of my biggest concerns about this election cycle is the whole public discourse is about those problems that are in front of our face today. And these problems are so important, by the way. Homelessness, housing affordability, traffic, so important. We need to solve it. And also, I believe that we need to be talking about these long-term issues, around environment, around what kind of city we want to be. That's why when I go around and knock on doors, one of the questions I ask is, what is your vision for the year 2100? Because when I ask that question, 80% of the people who I ask that question to mention nature or the environment or climate change or something related to that. And that signals to me that there is latent demand to talk about this as an issue. Let's go back to Fort Lawton. One of the things that I want to make sure as this new development goes in is that we do not encroach on the heron habitat. So I want to ensure that we can do everything we can to maintain old growth trees in that development as well as in Jefferson Park. When you look at a heat map is we know that green space does have a cooling effect for our urban cities. And so I want to ensure that we're, as I mentioned in my opening statement, that we're preserving our keystone lands, waterways, and heritage sites that make Seattle special. That means keeping our wild places wild. Yeah, thank you.
Great. And we are actually out of time. So if you would like to go ahead and do a 30-second wrap up, that would be wonderful.
Sure, thanks. Well, thanks again for taking the time. I do believe that we would be natural allies. My first involvement with the 36 Dems was when I was elected as a state delegate for Barack Obama back in 2008 over at Ballard High School. And that's when I was president of SPU Young Democrats, which back then, 10 years ago or 11 years ago now, was rather difficult to do on the campus of Seattle Pacific University, but the campus is changing quite dramatically and for good reasons. Now we have our first majority class in the freshman class at SPU. But I want to thank you again for making the time, and I ask for your endorsement. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.